Pitfall number 6 is infobesity. Have you ever tried to take a 16-ounce bottle and an 8-ounce glass and start pouring? What's going to happen? Well, you know it's going to flow, and I have no control over what sticks. It just doesn't work. Well, the same is true when we have all this information that we want to give an audience. It took us years to learn. It took us months to put together. We get it and we want to give it all to them in 15 or 20 minutes. Again, it doesn't work. So what I want you to do is to think about why. Why is it that people do that? Or why is it you do that? All this information, too much to absorb. Well, what I have found out is that in some ways it just shows people how smart we are. You know, we want to look smart in front of the audience. We're going to give them everything. Well, the heck with them and how they take it in. We want them to know how hard we've worked on it. Well, they don't care. And sometimes we think that we're going to run out of time, or we're going to run out of information before the time. You know what? That's not true. Here are some ways that you can begin to look at your audience and to draw, and not to drown them. I mean, the goal is not to drown them, just make sure that they get the material and that they walk out of there feeling smarter, not that you look so smart. Number one is, when you get all that information, and most likely it's going to be way more than you can possibly use in the allotted amount of time, begin to categorize it. What is the must know? What is the should know? What is the could know? And then begin to edit it. So you go back to that planning sheet that I showed you a little while ago. In box 1, you could have the must know. In box 2, it could be the should know. Box 3 could be the could know. Or you could have must, should, could within each category. Must, should, could, must, should, could, must, should, could. But what this does is you begin to say, well, what if I get cut off? What if I don't have the amount of time that I thought that I was going to have? And that always seems to happen. I remember one time I was giving an after-dinner speech, and the meeting planner wanted me to speak for 90 minutes, which I said was way too long. She said, this is what we're paying you for. I said, okay. So I prepared a 90-minute presentation. It was on personal branding, and I talk about marketing your magic. 5 points, M-A-G-I-C. 5 points, marketing your magic. She comes up to me right before the dinner and said, you know, I've been thinking about it, Marjorie. I think you should limit your presentation to 60 minutes. Now, you do the math. That's a third of my presentation gone. I practiced for a 90-minute presentation. But I always think in terms of the must, should, could, and I knew there was no way that I could talk about marketing your mag. I needed the ick in there as well. And that's why each of those categories had stories and examples and interaction that supported those MAGIC points. You've got to be prepared for that. You also need to think in terms of timing control. Timing is critical, and people don't want you to go over, and typically you are cut off before you even have a chance to finish a presentation at many meetings. So you've got to learn to gauge your time. It's not about talking fast. That's really not why you're there. So think in terms of the 75%, the 50%, and the 25% rule of thumb. The 75% is, if you're speaking for an hour and it's a straight presentation, plan, prepare, and practice to go for 75% of the allotted time. That's great. So that way, if you end early, no one's going to complain. Most likely you'll go the whole hour. If there's some interaction in there and some questions throughout, think in terms of the 50%. So only 50% is content. The rest you're leaving for those questions and the interaction. And then 25% is that there's a whole lot of interaction, like in a sales presentation, like in a training presentation, or often in senior management presentations. Figure you're going to have about 25% of the allotted time to give the content. The rest is going to be in discussion. Then plan appropriately. You also want to think about changing and editing the way you are doing things, because people won't sit for a really long period of time. I mean, maybe they'll sit there for an hour, but you know what? They're not going to just sit and listen. You need to think about how I change it, change it, change it. People are not hanging on your every word if you think so. That's your ego speaking. So think in terms of every 5 to 8 minutes changing what you are actually doing. And that means if you're lecturing, move to interaction. If you're giving data, tell a story or use some humor. If you're showing slides, then hit the B. I like to think of the B. It's for black screen or blank screen. I think it's Brody screen. But hit the B slide and it turns off the slides, and now the attention's back on you and you can move more and have more interaction. You can also, as I said, move and vary your voice. All of these are ways of keeping that audience with you and moving along with you and limiting the material to the amount of time that they can, what they can really take in. So the goal is limit